Hi guys, this is Stu from Mobile Geeks, and right now we're coming at you with another comparison video, this time comparing two of the larger devices on the market right now. So over here on the right we have the iconic iPhone 6 Plus, which is a 5.5-inch iPhone monster, and over here we have the 6-inch Huawei Ascend Mate 7, which is also one of my very favorite devices of late. Now, side by side, you can see straight away that they're both pretty much the same size. The specifications sheet will tell us that the iPhone is a little bit longer, but I think, if I'm being honest, they look to be exactly the same length, around 158 millimeters. Just get out there. But the key thing is here that actually on the iPhone 6 Plus, you're only getting a 5.5-inch screen, whereas if we compare this, align the screens up, you can see that the Huawei is giving you a lot more screen real estate because it's a full 6-inch screen. So that's the first thing that strikes me straight away, is that Huawei, as they mentioned on launch actually, they were very proud of the fact that they're getting a great screen to body ratio. So you're getting a lot of screen within a relatively tight area. So i.e. the bezels are very thin on the edge and also along the bottom here. Compared to Apple, certainly these are pretty thin bezels. Okay, now they're both 1080p screens, although of course with the iPhone you're getting a Retina display, which is their own kind of proprietary, kind of very, very, very high quality screen, as we've come to expect from Apple, and it looks great. I've got the brightness turned up full right now. We'll just check that. We can go into settings, brightness. Yeah, we've got it on full. So, and it is a bright display, and it's a great display. How does the Huawei compete? Well, when we first reviewed this a few weeks ago, the only comment we had about the display, really, it's an IPS LCD, is that it actually could have been a little bit brighter. And sitting next to the iPhone, yeah, this is certainly true. If we just open this up, okay, so with a white background, then yeah, it's bright enough. I mean, I'm not complaining, I'm just saying, compared to what we've got here in the Apple, it has a difficult job competing. But anyway, that's the screens. Let's look at the build quality for a second. They're both unibody aluminium kind of designs. So over here in the Apple we have a thin, when I say thin, 7.1 is reasonably thin, whereas the Huawei is a little bit thicker at 7.9, but it is contoured. It kind of gets a little bit thicker there in the middle, whereas with Apple it's kind of more squarish, apart from of course these beautifully crafted rounded edges that we see here. Ooh, look at that. Isn't it a beauty? Yeah, so in terms of design, Apple, of course, are knocking it out of the park. But that's not to say that Huawei's so far behind, because here we have another similar kind of unibody design. It's just a little bit bulkier. It's certainly, well, as we know, it's a couple of points of a mil thicker. But overall, it does feel a bit chunkier, and part of that is because of the weight. So with the Huawei, you got 185 grams, whereas over here on the Apple, you've only got 172, which is a big difference in your pocket. It's going to be a massive difference. Okay, also in terms of cameras, let's have a look at the cameras straight away. Over here, we're getting on the back rather, we're getting an 13 megapixel camera with LED flash, and on the front you're getting a 5 megapixel. Whereas on the iPhone you're getting an 8 megapixel on the back here in the corner, which is actually 1.5 micron pixels, so they should do a good job. And it's got a, well, on paper at least, a little bit of a paltry 1.2 megapixel on the back. Now I have a feeling that actually Apple's camera apparatus, as we know in the past, is second to none. We have tested the Huawei already, and it does a good job, but it's not quite in the same region as what we've seen from some Samsung and Sony devices, but it is a good camera. Whereas here on the Apple, I think what we have is probably something that we would regard as best in class. It's probably as good as anything out there. We're going to come back at you with a more in-depth camera review of the iPhone 6 and the iPhone 6 Plus, so we can look forward to that in the future. Now, if we consider the processor platforms involved in both of these devices, it's rather interesting because they're both using their own in-house designed processors. Over here in Huawei, we have the HiSilicon Kirin 925, which is a quad-core 1.3 Cortex-A7 system on chip that uses the Mali T628 graphics processor. Now, it doesn't perform quite as well as the top-end Snapdragon offerings, but it's not that far off, and it does a great job of of making you have a really good and slick Android experience. We're happy with the performance in the Huawei, that's for sure. And it's really interesting to see them use their own in-house produced chip. Now, Apple, of course, produced their own chips also. So this is the Apple A8, which is a dual-core 1.4 gigahertz with a Power VR graphics processor. And as we know from Apple, they're very, very good at optimizing between the hardware and the software. So we're expected to see blistering performance here on the iPhone 6 Plus, although it is kind of difficult to do comparable benchmarks between Android and iPhone 6 Plus, but we will endeavor to do so in subsequent reviews, videos, and articles. Okay, now, one key thing to notice, though, while on the subject of processing, is that this guy has 2 gigabytes of RAM, and this guy only has the 1 gigabyte of RAM. So that is something that I won't say I would be concerned about, but I certainly like the idea of having 2 gigabytes of RAM, that's for sure. Now, one of the major differences between the two is actually the batteries installed. And I think this is reflected in the size of the Huawei here. It is bigger, it is heavier, and it's chunkier. And I think part of that is because it's got a 4,100 milliamp hour battery inside, which is nuts. And let me tell you, the battery life on this guy is great. You're going to get at least 2 days, minimum. If you're a heavy user, maybe, okay, day and a half. And if you're a light user, maybe even 3. Now, the iPhone 6, on the other hand, has a 2,915 milliamp hour battery, which is not bad when you think about how thin it is. But for a device of this size and length, you know, I mean, you could be expecting something a little bit more. But we haven't run any tests yet, but from what I'm seeing, from what I'm getting feedback from the owner of this device, the battery life is better than on the iPhone 5. So, okay. I'm not going to go into software today, right now, because that would probably, comparing Android with iOS, would probably take way too long for the scope of this video. But let's just say that this guy here is going to cost you, without a contract, contract-free, around $800 or more, maybe 850 bucks. In Taiwan, we can get this guy right now for 2,600 Taiwan dollars, which puts it at the very high end. It's pretty much as expensive as anything else in the Guanghua market here in Taipei. Whereas with the Huawei Ascend Mate 7, you can get that for around 500 US dollars. Currently, or at least it's going to be, we know it's on sale in Europe for 500 euros, which probably will translate to 500 US. And actually in Taiwan, we've seen prices of 15,000 Taiwan dollars, which actually, yeah, it fits in perfectly with our estimation of 500 US dollars. So, big difference in price, 850 versus $500. You know, I've never been an Apple fan, I'm the first to admit it. But I have to say this is a beautiful device, and it's a really good size. But I can't help thinking the Huawei are actually very competitive. Okay, so anyway, just to conclude, 2 fantastic devices. Let us know in the comments what you think. Maybe I'm totally off the mark, and whatever. You tell me what you think. Thanks for listening. I'm Stu from Mobile Geeks. If you like this stuff, don't forget to subscribe. Bye-bye.